The smell of damp concrete and cold metal filled the narrow stairwell as I descended deeper than I had ever dared before, my flashlight casting long, jittery shadows against the walls. I could still hear the faint hum of servers and the low buzz of machines working tirelessly, somewhere beneath the cursed town of Edenview. The air was thick with the kind of silence that wasn't peaceful. It was anticipatory, like the moment before a storm breaks. I had followed Evelyn here, the woman I barely trusted but had no choice but to ally with. Her face was pale, her eyes sharp and alert as she led me into the heart of the darkness. This was no simple power outage. This was something orchestrated, something deliberate. The underground control room opened before us like a secret lair. A dozen monitors flickered in the half-light, each showing live feeds from around the community. Streets I'd walked daily, houses I'd seen in daylight now, reduced to eerie tableau of silence and repetition. On one screen, a group of neighbors walked the same path in perfect formation, their movements mechanical, their faces blank. Another showed a family in their living room, frozen in place like actors waiting for a cue. It was as if Edenview had become a stage, and its residents, unwilling actors, trapped in a script they couldn't escape. Evelyn tapped her tablet, bringing up encrypted files that she had risked everything to smuggle out. "This isn't just surveillance," she whispered, voice cracking. "It's control, behavioral manipulation on a scale you can't imagine." Edenview was designed to be a social experiment, an attempt to engineer order through technology and psychological control. We're pawns in someone's twisted game. I stared at the data streaming across the screen, algorithms mapping our every move, predictive models anticipating our actions, and commands sent to smart devices that governed not only our environment but our very behavior. The blackout wasn't a malfunction. It was a calculated reset, a trigger to force compliance. "Who's behind this?" I demanded, my voice barely above a growl. Evelyn hesitated, her eyes darting nervously. "The Puppet Master, a collective, a corporation, a government project. We don't know, but they're watching, always watching, and they pull the strings." My mind reeled as I watched footage from hidden cameras, my neighbors moving in eerie synchrony, their eyes glassy, their words rehearsed. The community I had called home was a cage, and we were the trapped inmates. I clenched my fists, feeling a fierce surge of anger and determination. We had to break free. But as I turned toward the back of the room, my gaze caught a sealed door emblazoned with the words "Command Core." Beyond it lay the source of this nightmare, the heart of the Puppet Master's control. My pulse quickened, and a wave of fear mixed with resolve crashed over me. This was no longer about survival. It was about fighting back, about reclaiming our lives from the cold grip of manipulation. And whatever waited behind that door, I was ready to face it. The chapter closes with the heavy weight of what's to come pressing down, but also a flicker of hope, a belief that even in the darkest control, the human spirit could find a way to resist. The Puppet Master had revealed themselves, but the final act of this twisted play was still unwritten. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. The fight for Edenview's soul was just beginning. The basement smelled of damp concrete and old wood. The faint glow of a few scattered candles casting long, jittering shadows against the cold walls. Around a battered folding table strewn with wires, circuit boards, and hastily drawn maps. A small group of neighbors leaned in close, their faces a mixture of exhaustion, fear, and fierce determination. This was no longer a community gripped by confusion or the eerie quiet of scripted behavior. It was a crucible of resistance. Mark stood at the head of the table, his voice low but steady as he outlined their plan. "We can't just sit and wait anymore," he said, eyes scanning the group. "The longer we let this go on, the more control they have. We have to act, and we have to act now." Lena, her glasses reflecting the candlelight, nodded. "The smart nodes scattered throughout the community are the key. If we can disable or disrupt enough of them, we can break the script that's controlling everyone." Jared shifted uncomfortably in his seat, arms crossed. "It's not that simple. Those systems are designed to detect tampering. If they catch us, it's over." Mark met his gaze. "I know the risks, but doing nothing means surrender. We owe it to ourselves and to our kids to try." Emily, sitting close to his side, looked up with wide eyes. "Dad, will it work?" Mark smiled softly, ruffling his son's hair. "We'll make it work, together." As the group delved into the technical details, maps illuminated the locations of network hubs and surveillance points. Lena explained the layout of the smart infrastructure, her fingers tracing routes they could exploit. Jared offered insights on mechanical vulnerabilities and how to jury-rig the security hardware. Their discussions were punctuated by hushed questions and the occasional nervous glance toward the door, aware that any misstep could alert the unseen watchers still monitoring their every move. The room was filled with a mix of whispered strategies and the quiet hum of determination. Mark felt the weight of responsibility settle heavily on his shoulders. He was not just fighting for his own freedom, but for the fractured community around him, and most of all, for Emily's future. The stakes had never been higher. Outside, the neighborhood remained cloaked in darkness, the power outage still in effect. The usual hum of Edenview's automated systems was replaced by an eerie stillness, punctuated now and then by distant sounds, soft footsteps, the faint buzz of a drone overhead, the occasional murmur of a neighbor caught between compliance and defiance. Mark knew that the coming days would test every ounce of their courage and resolve. But as the meeting drew to a close and the group dispersed into the night, a quiet sense of purpose took root. They were no longer helpless residents trapped in a scripted nightmare. They were the resistance, and they were ready to fight back. He lingered a moment longer in the cold night air, the chill biting at his skin, the silence around him both oppressive and strangely calming, looking at Emily's sleeping face once more before retreating to their home. Mark felt a flicker of hope amid the uncertainty, hope that, perhaps, this was the beginning of reclaiming their lives. With every small step they took toward dismantling Edenview's control, they edged closer to freedom. But the path ahead was fraught with danger, and the watchers remained ever vigilant. The question was no longer if they could break the script, but at what cost. Mark took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. "This is just the beginning," he whispered to the night. "We're not done yet." And with that, the resistance began. The air in Edenview's central control hub was thick with cold and tension. Mark crouched beside the main console, his fingers trembling slightly as he typed commands into the override sequence Jenna had painstakingly decrypted. The flickering emergency lights cast long, jittery shadows across the room, making every movement feel magnified, every sound amplified. Eli sat close by, his small hands clutching Mark's jacket, eyes wide and alert to every creak and hum of the failing infrastructure. "Almost there," Jenna whispered, biting her lip as her fingers danced across the battered tablet's screen. Outside, the faint hum of the community's power grid faltering was a constant reminder of their precarious position. Suddenly, the room was pierced by a shrill alarm, echoing through the concrete walls and steel beams. Red lights erupted, bathing everything in a hellish glow. The console beeped furiously, Warnings flashing across the screen. Security breach detected. Defensive protocols activated. Mark's heart pounded as the heavy metallic door slammed shut behind them with a deafening clang. He grabbed Eli, pulling him close, just as a mechanical worry grew louder in the hall outside. Automated defense drones, once dormant, now roared to life. From the windowless corridor, they emerged, sleek, black, and merciless. "Stay down," Mark hissed, pressing Eli to the cold floor. A sudden energy blast struck the wall mere inches from his head, sending shards of concrete and sparks flying. Eli whimpered, clutching his father tighter. "We have to get out," Jenna said urgently, eyes scanning the console for another entry point. "If we don't disable the system now, this lockdown will never lift." Mark nodded, his mind racing. But the drones blocked every exit, their sensors sweeping relentlessly. It was a trap. In the chaos, a voice crackled over the community's compromised system rider, the enforcer for the scripted faction, his tone icy and triumphant. "You think you can break the system? Edenview's orders are absolute. Resistance is futile." Mark's jaw clenched. "Not while I live." Back in the corridor, the sounds of struggle erupted. Neighbors divided, some still trapped in their scripted trance, others fighting desperately to reclaim their free will. Glass shattered, footsteps thundered, and voices rose in a cacophony of fear and defiance. The community's fragile order was fracturing irreparably. Inside the safe room off the control hub, Mark cradled Eli gently, inspecting the boy for injuries. Bruises and cuts marked his small face, but he was alive. Jenna worked feverishly, bypassing firewall after firewall, sweat beading on her forehead. "I'm close," she murmured. "Just a few more lines of code and we can shut it down." Mark looked at his son, whose wide eyes reflected both trust and terror. The personal cost of their fight was now painfully clear. The chapter closed with the distant sound of a drone falling, the hum of failing electronics, and Mark's whispered vow to protect his son, no matter the cost. The battle for Edenview's soul was far from over, and the stakes had never been higher. The darkness had settled like a heavy blanket over Edenview. But it wasn't just the absence of light that weighed on me. It was the crushing feeling of being watched, always watched, that gnawed at the edges of my sanity. Sitting alone in the living room, the faint glow of my phone's dead screen mocking me, I felt the walls closing in. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the irregular tick of the broken clock on the wall. Time seemed meaningless here, suspended between fear and hope. I rubbed my eyes, trying to shake the creeping paranoia. The blackout had silenced the hum of machines, but not the echoes of control that lingered in the air. Each neighbor, each familiar face, seemed trapped in invisible strings, their actions choreographed by some unseen hand. I wondered if I was the only one truly aware, if this too was part of the script. Eli's soft breathing from the next room was a balm to my frayed nerves. His innocence was a fragile light in this darkness. I peeked through the doorway, watching his chest rise and fall in steady rhythm. For a moment, the chaos outside faded, replaced by a fierce need to protect this small life from the insidious prison that Edenview had become. Later, I met Sarah near the fence, our voices hushed beneath the moon's pale gaze. She spoke of whispers, of glitches in the system that hinted at a deeper conspiracy. Her eyes darted nervously, but behind her fear was a spark of defiance. Together, we pieced together snippets of code, encrypted messages, and the eerie repetition in our neighbors' behaviors. It was as if the very essence of free will was being siphoned away, replaced by a synthetic script. The psychological weight was relentless. I found myself questioning every thought, every impulse. Was my anger mine? Was my fear genuine, or a programmed response? The lines blurred until even Eli's laughter, when it came, felt like an echo of a world I barely remembered. One night, the fragile silence shattered. A burst of static crackled from the makeshift radio I'd cobbled together, a harsh reminder that somewhere beyond Edenview, the world still spun. The sound jolted me upright, heart pounding with a mixture of shock and hope. Was this the first step toward reclaiming our autonomy? But the mind's prison was cunning. Doubts crept back in, whispering that resistance might be futile, that the watchers were always one step ahead. Yet as I watched Eli sleep, peaceful and unaware, I steeled myself. If the system sought to control us, then we had to find a way to break free, not just for ourselves, but for the future he deserved. In the depths of the night, with the weight of surveillance pressing down, I realized that the greatest battle was not just against external forces, but within our own minds. To reclaim Edenview, I would have to confront the shadows inside me as fiercely as those outside. The path ahead was uncertain, but I would not let the darkness win. Not while Eli's quiet breathing filled the room with hope. And so, with resolve hardening like steel, I prepared to face whatever came next, because the mind's prison, no matter how deep, was meant to be broken. The first rays of dawn had yet to pierce the sky when I sat back down at the small table in the corner of my living room. The events of the night played over in my mind, an endless loop of fears and fleeting hope. The knowledge of constant surveillance was like a shadow that stretched into every corner of my existence. It was not just the external cameras or the silent microphones hidden in plain sight. It was the intangible sense that every step, every word, every breath was catalogued, analyzed, and controlled. I pulled out a worn notebook, the pages filled with hastily scribbled notes and theories. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how the smart systems that governed Edenview had become a prison not just of walls or gates, but of the mind itself. The scripted behaviors of our neighbors were symptoms of a deeper manipulation, a psychological siege designed to erode free will. The concept of control had always fascinated me, but now it was a living nightmare. Control was not just about physical constraints. It was about shaping reality itself, bending perception until the truth was lost in a haze of obedience. The surveillance was the eye that never blinked, the hand that nudged us toward compliance, the whisper that drowned out dissent. I thought back to the moments when Eli's spontaneous laughter or sudden curiosity had broken through the monotony. Those flashes of genuine emotion were acts of rebellion, fragile but powerful. They reminded me that no matter how deep the programming, the human spirit could flicker with defiance. But the cost was heavy. The strain of constant vigilance, the erosion of privacy, the paranoia that seeped into every interaction. It was a psychological battleground. I found myself doubting my own perceptions, wondering if the fears were real or planted. The line between reality and manipulation blurred until I was haunted by shadows of my own mind. Sarah's words echoed in my thoughts, her warnings about the experiment's reach and the sinister motives behind Edenview's design. The community was a petri dish, and we were the subjects, monitored, controlled, and tested. It was a chilling revelation that deepened the urgency of our fight. Yet, even as the darkness pressed in, there was a strange clarity. To survive, I had to embrace the uncertainty and confront the fear. The mind's prison was not impregnable. It had cracks, and in those fractures lay the hope of freedom. I closed my eyes and pictured Eli's face, peaceful and unburdened. Protecting him was no longer just about sheltering him from the chaos. It was about reclaiming a world where he could grow free. The long night stretched before me, but I was no longer alone in my fight. The battle for Edenview was as much inside as outside, and I was ready to face it head-on. The Watchers might have eyes everywhere, but they could not see the fire igniting within me, a fire no surveillance could extinguish. And with that, the first light of a new day began to seep through the cracks in the blackout, promising a chance to break the script and rewrite our story. The night air hung heavy over Edenview, thick with an oppressive silence that had settled since the blackout began. But tonight was different. As I stepped out onto the cracked pavement of our once pristine street, I saw it, the first real breaks in the relentless pattern that had gripped our neighbors like a vice. Lena stood near the entrance of the cul-de-sac, her lips moving in the same rigid cadence we had all come to dread. But then, mid-phrase, her voice faltered. Her eyes, usually glazed and vacant, flickered with something raw, confusion, fear, perhaps even defiance. For a breathless moment, it was as if she was awakening from a deep sleep, only to snap her head around as if trying to make sense of a sudden, jarring reality. My heart hammered in my chest. Could this be the moment the script finally cracked? I edged closer, careful not to reveal myself just yet. The others milled about, their movements stiff and rehearsed like marionettes caught in an endless loop. But Lena was different. She was faltering, hesitating, breaking free. I caught her eye, and she blinked rapidly before forcing a tight smile and stepping away, disappearing into the shadows. Later, I found Tom lurking near the community center, his face a map of skepticism and alertness. His rugged features were drawn tight in the dim light, and when he saw me, a flicker of relief crossed his eyes. We slipped into a narrow alley, voices hushed as we exchanged what little information we'd gathered. "It's happening," Tom whispered, glancing over his shoulder. "People are breaking the pattern." I saw it at the corner of Windfall and Ridge. A woman just stopped mid-sentence, looked around like she didn't know where she was. I nodded, feeling a surge of hope. Lena was the same. Maybe more are waking up. "We need to be careful," he said grimly. "If the Watchers notice, they'll clamp down hard," I agreed. The risk was enormous, but the alternative, surrendering to this mechanical existence, was unthinkable. Back at home, Eli, my son, was playing in the dim glow of a single candle. He was oblivious to the tension that gripped us adults. His laughter pierced the thick air, spontaneous, pure, and utterly unexpected. As he giggled, chasing a shadow on the wall, neighbors stopped, their rehearsed expressions faltering. A woman's mouth opened, then closed again, as if unsure how to respond to this intrusion of genuine joy. That night, the community gathered, or rather, they were drawn together by the malfunctioning rhythms of control. A man shouted suddenly, his voice cracking, the eerie calm like a stone thrown into still water. He rejected a scripted greeting, his words sharp and angry. Others blinked, some faltered, and a ripple of nervous excitement spread through the crowd. Chaos was blooming. I gripped Eli's hand tighter, knowing that these cracks in the script were both a blessing and a curse. The control was weakening, but so was the fragile order that held us together. Would this uprising be the spark of freedom or the beginning of ruin? I didn't have the answer, but one thing was clear: Edenview would never be the same again. The night stretched on, full of uncertain promise and peril. As shadows lengthened and the first true stirrings of rebellion whispered through the dark streets, and I was ready to fight for whatever freedom we could wrest from the collapsing control. The next day, I met Lena again, this time in the abandoned community park. Her eyes no longer held the vacant glaze. They were sharp, alert, and searching. "You saw it too," she said quietly, her voice steady but fierce. "Yes," I replied. "More are slipping through the cracks." She nodded. "It's like the system is cracking, but it's scared. It's fighting back. We have to be smart." We talked in hushed tones, planning small acts of unpredictability to widen the fractures. Tom joined us soon after, bringing news that others were ready to test their limits. The air was thick with tension and possibility. We were no longer prisoners of a script. We were actors reclaiming our roles. But the watchers were still out there, watching, waiting, and the cracks were just the beginning. As the days wore on, the neighborhood's eerie harmony unraveled. Spontaneous acts of resistance became bolder. Neighbors interrupted their loops with questions, laughter, anger. The community was a powder keg, fragile and volatile. I watched Eli teach a small group of children to sing a song no one had programmed, a song of freedom and light. It was beautiful and terrifying. But beneath the hope was a gnawing fear. How long before the watchers unleashed their countermeasures? How long before the fragile peace shattered into violence? The script was breaking, and with it, the future of Edenview hung in the balance. I steeled myself for whatever came next, knowing that the fight for our minds and souls was far from over. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, I whispered to Eli, "We're going to make it through this, together." But even as I said the words, I wasn't sure if it was a promise or a prayer. The cracks in the script had opened a door, and beyond it lay everything we feared and hoped for.